Hello everyone, Master Xeon1001 here, and in this video I am proud to announce the release of Hardop 00985 Neodymium X. So first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to Proxy AR ST3, whose work is being introduced this version for the first time, Near Home, aka Louvre, Bonjordo7, Ko, and General Ginsu. Having a team able to assist with this project is instrumental towards its continuance, and without a team behind me, I would not even have the will to want to continue with this thing. You know, as the world changes, sometimes all you can do is just focus on the work, and for us, it was really focusing on these releases to ensure that, you know, if this was a final release, it would be the best release, but definitely a transformative release that kind of brings about a new Hops. I always see people showcasing Hops to me in the form of GIFs and complaints, and I always notice that the help is unreadable, and this is something that's always irked me, as well as wanting to have more control and customization abilities with the UI. So this version is definitely focused on optimizing the user experience and trying to make improvements toward the way that we convey information to you, the user. And so a lot of things have changed, but I hope that you hang in there with us and help us, you know, refine things and bring it back to a level of sanity that you've all come to know and expect and love. And, you know, complaints and comments are always welcome. I'm always glad to hear what everyone's opinions are. You know, even the demotivational comments keep us going. I like to share them with the team, and, you know, we have a laugh about them together. I'm like, this person is quite displeased with this particular feature. We should think about how we can make this person most happy. So with ST3, he was handed a large series of problems with the array that I had, and I was like, you got to solve them all. And the solution that he came up with was one quite interesting, and while it's definitely different than the array that you've come to know, I think it's an array that you can all come to love if you just give it enough time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. From the moment that Hardops is enabled, you'll notice that there's an option now for you to determine where the panel category name shows up as. By default, it's named Hops. However, we can rename this to something like the best tool ever, and you'll see that the name will update immediately. However, you can also go in and just delete it, and that will just remove the tab entirely. And with that, we can go ahead and continue. But this has been a very popular request, and I'm glad that we were finally able to get this added to Hardops, and we hope to also add it to Boxcutter very soon. You'll also notice from the moment you enable Hardops that the preferences have begun getting cleaned up. So there's now options for fade in and fade out, and also options for fast UI, which is the new UI powering Hardops. There's also operator options here, which will be adjusted as we go on. However, we probably want our fade time here to be at least 5, just for what you're going to be seeing later. And in regards with color, I do like to enable the Hops logo, which you can see right there ever so faint. We'll just scale that up and bring it down, because I like my Hops to feel a little bit like NASCAR. There we go. I like to call that Big Little Hops. Just put it right in the corner, and now we are good to go. From the moment that you begin using Hardops and you even go in and do something like sharpen, you'll be presented with a small information notification dialog that will give you information about what just happened. I kind of found it funny to have it let you know that S-sharpen applies 0 modifiers. But just to humor it, we're going to just use a little bit of Boxcutter and just cut some cuts in here using quick execute God Ray mode. So far so good. And we'll go in and C-sharpen. And you see that C-sharpen applied 6 modifiers and left 0 remaining, which is good information to have. These are things that I could not convey through the F9 panel here. So it's something that I felt was going to need to be solved by the UI. I'm a bit of a stats junkie, so having information on what's going on in the middle of working is crucial to me. For example, whenever you go in bevel to modal, you'll see that there's information at the bottom of the screen. You'll also see that you can now press H for help, which will display all the hotkeys pertaining to the operation that's currently active. There's a lot more to it, of course, than that, But one of the big things I want to show is that we'll press H to close help, but you can press tilde and it will bring you up a what we call the fast UI, the micro ribbon. You can also press it again and it'll actually leave it in place. So there's actually 3 settings of this UI. So while you're inside of a modal, you can press tilde and we'll be back at the bottom. We press tilde again. We're following the mouse cursor with the UI. You press tilde again. The modal is still active, but we've dropped the UI and we can now continue to work. So all 3 of these options have proven to be useful in various avenues of working, which is why they're now the standard. So if we even do something like deselect and press Q and add a camera, you can see that we've added a camera turntable. There's 2 revolutions added. Lets us know to press F9 to adjust settings and numpad 0 to jump to camera. Of course, I wasn't able to read as fast as it fades, but if you are a slow reader, I would recommend increasing the fade time or the amount of time that the operator stays on screen. But if we jump in camera, you can see that we are set and we're now primed to rotate our camera around twice. So to continue on messing around, I'll just do a couple more box cuts here and just show a few more operators that also have additional drawing added. For example, if you go and use Smart Apply, which is my attempt to create a new type of C# that works on every type of mesh, not just certain types of meshes, you'll see that it also lets you know that 4 modifiers were applied, 1 modifier was left, and the left modifier was bevel. So kind of one of the rules with Smart Apply that comes over from C Sharpen is I don't want it to apply the last bevel. Also, if we Alt-click Sharpen, we'll add a weighted normal on here, which will fix the shading. So we'll just do some more cuts, and of course with the power of sorting it's just going to work. But if we go under Smart Apply again, you can see that 3 modifiers were applied, 2 modifiers were left, and it was a bevel and a weighted normal. And I feel that this information will give you a better idea of what's going on as I'm working, and hopefully I'll have to explain less and less because there will be an on-screen notification system to actually assist in conveying that information. In fact, the main goal of this new UI is something I call information conveyance, but that is the fast UI in a nutshell. And this is actually taking over every modal, and then that brings us to the next part. This new version of HardOps also introduces a new type of array. You can find it in your Q menu. However, under Mesh Tools it's called ST3 array. So once you activate it, you'll see this red circle, which means that holding control will allow you to move your array on that particular axis. If you ever want to change your axis while holding control, you can press X and change that axis. If you want to change your axis without actually resetting the previous one, you can press X, X, and then hold control and begin moving in order to adjust on this axis as well. Currently, this is a new system, so we do expect users to find glitches and issues and possibly even want to revert to the previous array. However, this array is unique because it consolidates all of our previous systems all in one, which I mean array, rail array, and twist, and you can actually jump through these interchangeably on the fly by pressing 1, 2, and 3. You can see that by pressing 2, I'm able to jump over to radial array, and I'm currently in the sticky UI where it's following the mouse. I can press tilde and lay it down, or I can press tilde again and put it at the bottom. And we could just hold control and just move our circle in order to adjust our radial, scrolling the wheel to change things on the fly. And of course, in this particular array, view control is unlocked, so you're able to move around and center your view and pan and all of that good stuff. And with 3, we're able to jump quickly over to twist, where we can just twist an object, and by pressing H, we can see to help. Right now, I already have the modifier panel up, which you can bring up by pressing M. M inside of a modal will show you the modifier so that you can best assess what is going on with your modifiers and know what's before your modifier, what's after your modifier, and where you're at currently in your modifier stack, kind of giving you a little bit more on the awareness category. So the main thing with this particular array is that if you press tab, it will go into an expansive mode. And this expansive mode is a little bit different than what you would expect from our traditional modals and even the fast UI. And that is that these buttons are clickable. You can click them and change the states. You can click and drag and change things. A lot of work has actually went into making this system, and we've been working on this for a couple of months now, over the last couple of releases on the side, to really get the system to a level that people can use. And even now, I still feel that we could cook this longer in the oven. However, the longer the things cook, the more grinding it can be on the people involved. So sometimes it's best to just get something out the door, get tester feedback, and then begin working on improvements with the backing of customers and their complaints behind me to validate the very serious concerns that I bring up quite often that I feel we need to address with these tools. But if you think that's great, you click on help, and the help actually can be scaled up using this handle. You can also move the help around the screen if you want. And you can see all these options here. And the interesting thing is that you can just click on it and it will just change. So the goal was clickable help. However, as we worked on this, we realized that having users be able to click on the help is somewhat helpful, but we could probably make an options quick panel that would actually be more useful than this. So that's something that we hope to expand on in the future and possibly changing the way that users interact with our tools to try to create a left mouse centric system. If we close the help and bring up the modifiers here, you can also see that the modifiers are listed. Right now, they currently serve as just a placeholder, just letting you know where your modifiers are in your stack. In fact, we could press A a couple of times to just add more arrays here. And you see that every time I add an array, it actually changes the axis that it's being added on. And this is part of the smart behavior of array. I'm actually going to right click it and then go back into it. But one of the interesting things with array itself is we start it, we press tab, we're in the expansive mode. If I want to add an additional array, notice that the moment that I add this array, it actually changes the axis it's being added on. And I can actually just click and drag this in order to choose how far out it goes. If I click off the UI, it'll disappear. But we can just go right back into it and just be a little more mindful of how close to the edge we're clicking here. Even click and hold and where the gesture of the mouse goes will determine how the movement happens. So this is something that we definitely see as possibly the future of how users can interact with modals and things like that. In fact, clickable, touchable, interactable UI is something that I've wanted forever, and now it's finally something that's within reach. So I hope that everyone's can enjoy the new array with a kind of a sense of wonder, because we definitely understand that there's work that's needing to be done with it, and I'm definitely more than interested in hearing your input and suggestions as far as what this circle could be, what type of gizmo would be better suited for doing this sort of operation. But just to let you know, in the event that you want classical array back, you can just go into it under the modifier menu. Under the modifier menu, it's just classical array, which has also received the Fast UI facelift. However, once you go to the ST3 array, there is no going back to classic array. I'm just telling you, over the course of testing this for a couple of months, it became pretty apparent that this is probably the more superior way to array. Some of my initial concerns was things like, let's say I drew a box cut and I wanted to array this. Moving it like so was a little bit odd at first. However, as I got used to it, I realized that it offered me far more possibilities than before and can be quite fast and nimble once you actually get used to it. But I hope everyone gives the new ST3 array a try, and do let us know what you think of it. So the core of HardOps is two main sharpeners, S# and C#. S# is easiest to think of as a type of smooth shade for hard surface. C# is pretty much the same thing, except it applies select modifiers. One of the popular requests was the ability to, under bool options, be able to have C# remove cutters. So if you have that activated inside of the control tilde, whenever you run C#, which is actually the control behavior of clicking sharpen, it will actually remove your cutters. So you can see here that it says that the cutters have been removed. And if we tab in edit mode, you can see that they've all been applied, and we look at the cutters collection and there's no cutters remaining. So this has been a popular option. I'm glad to see that AR has finally added it to HardOps. A common scenario that comes up when I'm working is needing to use curves in order to perform knife project. So if we press Q and we go and just do a sphere cast to quickly turn this cube into a sphere, we'll Control A and apply the visual geometry to mesh. And I'll shift right click to place my cursor here, and we'll just bring that curve in, RZ, and just kind of set up the situation here. And so there's one way of dealing with it where in object mode you can shift select them both, And by going under booleans and knife and shift clicking it, it will actually run knife project, where you can then go ahead and do what you need to with your mesh. In my case, I like to press Y twice because I have Mesh Machine installed. Who doesn't? And rip the mesh off and begin doing what I do with it. And this is a technique I use quite often for helmets, and I just wanted to enhance that in hard ops. Of course, edit mode support may come down the road. I am thinking of plans on how we can go about revamping knife to be more of an all-in-one for our needs, but that will come later. But just letting you know, curve support has now been added to hard ops knife. If you follow the last couple of release videos, you know that due to some of the changes with the way that selection works in Blender, that circle has just been a little bit of a pain, but I'm happy to report that that has now been resolved, and that now if you were to go in operations and just use circle, of course with loop tools enabled, you are now able to deal with multiple circles just like you used to without any issue. So I'm glad to see that that's past me. Making circles in edit mode was one of my favorite things, and I'm glad to see it return. Smart Apply is just one of those things that we just revisit every release in order to make sure it's just a little bit smarter. So I'm going to go ahead and just press X and delete this cube, and we'll go ahead and insert a hops box. And by grabbing the dots, we can go ahead and adjust the scales and proportions of this and start getting the hops box we want. And I can press Alt W, switch over to Box Cutter, which is my workhorse, and just get to work here. Of course, the beauty of sort, just holding it down, ensuring that everything is placed where it needs to be placed in a modifier stack without me having to think about it. So that's kind of the idea in Box Cutter, was to sort and deal with modifiers without having to really think about it. But of course, it would be nice to know what's going on with my modifiers, but that isn't the purpose of this. So Smart Apply was made to be an alternative to C#, and when C# was first made, its main goal was to apply Boolean modifiers and never apply to bevel. So if we were to take this, which you can see this shape and all the modifiers that it's comprised of, and see that it's a rather complex shape. So just choosing to apply all of these modifiers has to be a rather tricky endeavor. In fact, really we don't want to apply these last two because of course weighted normal will force shading on the model, which we don't want, and the last bevel will just add too much geometry than what we need. The previous bevels are actually more kind of a constructive bevel. So if we go in here and we were to control click sharpen, which uses C#, you can see that not only do we get an error, it doesn't work out. It only applies to booleans, and the rest of the mesh is just not going to work out. So this is where Smart Apply comes in. You can go ahead and just click Smart Apply, and it will apply, in this case, 50 modifiers, left 2, and it left these two, the last bevel and the last weighted normal, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. But there's additional behaviors that have been added to Smart Apply, like for example, if we hover over it, we can see the tooltip. And the one I want to talk about is the shift click of Smart Apply, where if you shift click, it will actually duplicate the mesh and give you a copy of that, where you can then do with what you want. In this case, what I want to do is take this particular face of all faces and set it, delete the border, go ahead and use bevel on it in a 2D state, maybe activate clamp in order to clamp it and prevent it from overshooting. We also want to go ahead and slap a weld modifier on it because that's the only way we're going to know that those doubles didn't just merge. And then from here, just add a solidify. So right here, I'm showing it a little slowly. However, in my general workflow, I usually jump through this process over and over pretty fast. And so just letting you know that Smart Apply has received some improvements, and so now you can get in here and actually extract surfaces based on a derived version of the mesh, which should make things a little bit easier if you're getting into these paneling workflows that are getting so popular lately. There's also additional things related to the way that Smart Apply works, like if we take a plane and we move it over, we can use Q and just bevel this plane. If we go under operations and we control click on Smart Apply, which will convert to curve and expand, you see that the object has been converted into a curve, and now we're in a curve adjust mode. So I use a lot for things like that. Like sometimes I will take a shape like what we see here. I will just shift click to Smart Apply. I'll grab this edge, jump around to the other side, just grabbing this selection, maybe switch over to vertex mode, delete every other vertex, and then with this selection, once again, run a smart apply. And over the course of this, I'll be showing faster ways that we are able to get to this sort of conclusion, but just to give you a heads up that smart apply has been improved and it's safe for you to get in there and have some fun with it. Let's say you're working and you've been just taking this box and just giving it the business. Just cutting and slicing and just setting it up right. Just doing your usual cuts. Of course, we'll mirror it to the other side. Maybe do a cut down here. Maybe do one here. Bring it in. Press T to add some thickness. Press G to move. Maybe press Alt V and turn on EVHQ so the viewport looks better. We can see everything that's been turned back on. And so if you were to go in and dice this shape, because all these modifiers are live, normally you would get a result like this, where the mesh is still modified, but all your dicings happen on an unmodified version. So I'm happy to announce that there's now a new version of dice added, where if you were to hold Alt, you can smart apply your dice prior to execution, which will ensure that when you run dice, your mesh is then set up and perfect for you to dice. And then you could just follow that up with a twist 360. So you're set there. Another approach is that, let's put all the modifiers back by undoing. We can press Control tilde, and under bool options, or actually dice options, there's now an option for pre-apply where you can choose smart apply. And so whenever we run dice, it will run smart apply, setting you up for you to dice this shape, and the shape will be applied, diced, and ready for you to twist. So this was something that kind of irked me when dice was first made. I always wanted to just be able to quickly get in there and set it up. The next thing is being able to lop meshes. I really want to be able to lop them, but I think that we will be making some progress in that direction in the future. However, the goal of making dice a little bit more straightforward for users that want to use it and also have it smart apply prior to apply. There's also just flat out apply where it will just convert the mesh into a mesh and then run dice, but smart apply is a little bit nicer as far as the way that it chooses to apply certain modifiers and omit others. So just something to keep in mind if you do get in here and begin playing with dice and wish that you could apply your modifiers prior to its execution. In addition to being able to dice in edit mode, which you've always been able to do, you're also able to dice between a region. So for example, let's say that we had an area like this and we were trying to just dice it. We can just select this area, run dice, and actually dice this area as needed. In fact, we can draw an area here. Let's just make one here with box cutter and run dice, and we can also dice this as needed. So now you have selection area dice. You also have the ability to select a point and another point and run dice in order to dice in between 2 points in a selection. So we've been working on refining dice to be a little bit useful in modeling as well, but I do hope that you get in there and see what dice is able to do for you. In my mind, dice is like a loop cut of sorts. So we'll press Shift A and add a cube, and we'll just scale this cube up, and this will be our primary object. We'll press Alt V and turn on wireframe just so we can see our wires. And I'll Shift D, duplicate it, and make a second cube. And for this one, we're just going to shade it as a wire, so that way we can see it. And the interesting thing about this particular update is if we scale this cube out and rotate it, and select the second object as well, whenever we run dice, we have the ability to now dice using only the second object. Right here, you see that use what's called big dice, which is where it will dice both objects using the same die. However, there's also an alternative mode where if you shift click, it will actually dice using only the selection. So this is a way to just force loop cuts in a model, and I've been using this for all sorts of situations where I just need to force a particular edge flow. There we are using big dice, shift click for just regular old 2 dice, which is what I refer to it as. And you can see that I'm able to just dice this model any way that I need to. So I haven't even begun to think about some of the creative benefits that could come with using dice in this particular fashion, but I'm excited to say that this has now been added to Hardhops, and you should now be able to use a secondary object for dicing by just holding shift whenever you click dice. So with HardOps, there's a system in place where, for example, if you have a bevel, we can go ahead and just add a cube, and whenever we do a difference, we can hold control in order to bypass the sort. And whenever we do that, it looks like this. And this is one way we would work. However, you can press Control tilde and then activate bevel step, and this will actually allow you to do what's called a bevel step, which is, or a Boolean step, which is where you actually add a different bevel on the new level. So once we just grab this and hold control, you can see that there's a bevel isolated to this area. We can grab this cube, duplicate it up, and by holding control and clicking difference, we can see that we are setting a bevel isolated to this level. So it's basically a Boolean plus a bevel that is at a 60-degree angle, so that way everything connects properly. And we'll do one more right here just to get the point across, and that is BStep. A big part of my workflow is turning things into curves, and with this release we attempted to make some improvements with that particular aspect of the workflow. So if we go and control click Smart Apply, we can actually just turn this into a curve, which is what control clicking Smart Apply is supposed to do. However, we can also press V, which will actually set it to be a poly instead of a NURB, and V will switch it back and forth, so that way, in case you're wanting to get something a little more round, you're able to do so by just pressing V and also switch it back on the fly. We had Bezier in as an option previously. However, we found that it was actually more problematic to switch out of it. So in the meantime, you're only switching between NURBs and polys at this time. So if you thought control clicking Smart Apply to turn something into a curve is interesting, if you press Q and you go under operations, there's an option now called curve extract. If you use it in object mode, you can see that it converts the whole object to a curve. And then of course we could press V in the middle of the curve taper modal in order to change it into a NURB if we wanted, or press V to change it back into a poly. And that's good and all, but this tool is actually made to be used in edit mode. And one of the ways that I actually like to use it is I will grab two faces, Shift D duplicate, Shift H hide the rest. We'll delete that edge and just grab all of these and press Control Shift B to bevel all of them, and just select them and choose curve extract, and now we've created a curve extraction that's nice and rounded. And that's one way that I enjoy using this tool. However, another way that I enjoy using it is to just kind of create buckles on the fly. So of course we have special behaviors inside of HardOps where if you're using a 2D plane and you use bevel, we will go ahead and bevel it on vertices because more than likely that's what you want. There's not going to be any angles, but by having it automatically work on verts, it just works best. So we bevel this plane, and then we go back in here and we choose curve extract, and you can see that now a curve has been extracted from this. And that's just one way of operating with this thing. So to not leave this tool as simply just curve extract, the extraction part is also something worth going into. So we'll just go in edit mode and we'll just select this edge, and I'm going to just control click mark in order to bevel it, which is what mark does when you control click it. And I'm just going to grab these two faces and we're going to go under operations, and I'm going to shift click on curve extract, and now you can see that this has been extracted into a plate. And we can now in object mode control click bevel, press 1, and then alt click sharpen to add a weighted normal in order to quickly get a very nice shaded plate extracted from this model. Because when it turns out that extracting curves is easy enough, and extracting planes is actually even easier. In fact, if you control click it, you can literally extract a new object from selection, which doesn't actually apply to mod and extract it, which is maybe something we'll need to evaluate in the future. Kind of reminds me of 2-plane, but it's 2-piece, but we can always just go in here and solidify it if desired. Right click cancel, get in here and play with our bevel, press 2 to jump into vertex bevel, and then solidify. And so that's just two different ways that you're able to work with this. However, this tool is built for use in edit mode, but in object mode it's also equally as fun. So we shift click this, we're able to pull this out, and because of the non-manifold behavior we get thickness that isn't actually intersecting on itself, looking terrible. So thankful for the Solidify modifier receiving improvements, allowing for this to happen. And so we'll just grab this point, just bevel it, try to match it up by eye, you know, for fun here. And that is to plate and to extract in a nutshell. So I received a comment just earlier saying that I love 2box. Well, my response was, I have bad news for you. It's gone into next release. So let me show you its replacement. We press Q, go under operations, which is basically QOT, and we can go in and bring back the classic box. However, if we press F9, you can see that you can now change this to be a myriad of items ranging from cubes to planes to monkeys and cylinders. But you can also make it work for individual objects, make it equalize it for particular objects that require equalized dimensions, or even make the shape based off the modified version. And so if we go in here, we can see that we can quickly make a monkey, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We can also make a cylinder and even choose which axis that it occurs on. And this can come in handy for those times where you're just really needing to create a very particular shape in an area while you're working. And so this is something that the more I use it, the more I find that it's just one of those essential tools. In fact, right here with my box cut, I actually have quick execute on, but we'll just select this area here and just give that a test and press QOT, and we have our shape, and we bring up F9 and we can roll the wheel and get exactly the shape we need, where we can just roll that into place and possibly bold that in and move on with our lives. So the goal, of course, is always to make our tools faster and faster so that you can get where you're needing to go without all the rigmarole of having to fight through hotkeys. So I'm proud of the work that's actually been done with this release, and some of these features that I'm talking about, while I sound rather monotone, I'm seriously excited for. Being able, when I was first able to make planes or boxes, I was like, wow, this is the best thing ever. There's so much we could do with this. I'm going to shift click that, control click that, then turn it off. Something I've already addressed with Proxy that needs to be addressed is how release lock works with laser cut and laser cut lock, because I feel that it needs to be turned off much easier than what you just saw there. But continuing on, I'm just going in and just cutting away in our newly created area. And in fact, if I want to take it a step further, I could go ahead and click the apply button, go in edit mode, and just make a small selection after pressing W. You know, wouldn't you wish that that could be a select box sometimes while inside of Box Cutter still? We also wonder the same thing. So right here, I'm going to deselect this, and we'll press QOT to just let you know that I mean business. And we're going to actually make this a box this time, and we'll go back into object mode. We've kind of got this area right where we want it, and this actually gives me an idea for a feature I want called black hole, where we basically create a box and literally neutralize an area of its detail, equalizing the surfaces around it to basically heal it back. Like, I feel that we could make this heal box, and so this is something I joke about all the time internally, and I hope that this thing comes to pass. In fact, as I see myself doing in this video, it makes me realize that this is something that definitely should come to pass. So with that, let's move on to the next topic. Someday I want to do tutorials focused on more cute assets, and this model here, made by Crystal Len from Simply Cute, was one that I found myself interested in. It's just a cute little Shiba dog. And what I wanted to do with it was create an empty and then reset its origin. So, you know, I'm sure Machine has some fancy tool for this. However, you know, if you mess with tab, you know, you can't mess with tab. Just all I'm saying. So anyways, I'll just align an empty here, set it to view, and just try my best here to just get it in between. And so we'll select the empty, select the dog, and the goal is to just basically get the head oriented so that I can work with this particular model. And I just want to show you guys how I went about solving and dealing with this problem. So I'll press Control P, or I guess I'll press Control H. So hook to selected object. Because I have an empty selected as the primary object and then the mesh as a secondary object, I'm able to hook this to it, which means that now when I move this, it actually resets the dog. So if I press Alt R, we get something like this, which is most undesirable. However, R90 minus, we get something that's a little more straight. Of course, let's forget about the body here. So what I'll do is Control I, Control G, or actually making it a vertex group and then hiding it manually seems like it would be a lot of hotkeys that are unnecessary. So maybe we have a mask. And if we mask this and come out, we'll just grow that mask a little bit more. Maybe Alt H. And Control G, assign to active group. There we go. So now we got this thing right where we want it without the body distracting. And we have the head rotated just right. So if you press Q, reset axis is now added to the empty Q menu so that you can go in and quickly orient something on the screen just a little bit better. Of course, I feel that the reset axis could be improved a little bit more. So in addition to this, let's go ahead and just take this and we'll grab this and just Alt X across, just see what we got. And that's about what I got last time. I had a little bit of a seam in the middle that I had to work on, but just to show you the result of where I got with it when I was messing with it before we move on to the next segment was about here. Just kind of goofing off with it. Still didn't even get into rendering of it, but was still a fun model, and I plan to refine this workflow and get back to you about it in the future. So the simplest way to explain bevel is that if you select a cube and you press Q and you go to bevel, we'll put a bevel on it for you. And you see that the drawing that I have right now is actually following the mouse. I could press tilde and it'll stay in place, or I could press tilde again and it'll put it at the bottom of the screen. And this way you can actually see all the information that's actually attached to it. You can see that I'm moving the mouse to change the width. I'm scrolling the wheel in order to adjust the segments. I'm also able to press P and adjust the profile. So if any of these hotkeys are confusing, you can always press H in order to see the help. There have been a few changes to this version. For example, N will now harden normals, but in edit mode, N will continue to flip the normal for the reverse bevel like previously. So another interesting thing to note about bevel is that if we look at the tooltip, if you control click it, it'll add another bevel at an angle of 30. But if you control shift click, it'll add an angle of 60. And I'm beginning to realize as I explain this more and more that the angle of 30 may not be needed. So we may be changing that to control in the next version. However, at this time, I'm going to hold control and shift and just add another bevel level. And you can see at the bottom here, it says that we're on bevel 001. We can see that we're on bevel 2. Bevel 001, and it also says 60-degree bevel added in the information display here. If we press X, which as you can see sets the bevel at 50% of the current, we've dropped this shape down, and so you can't actually see what's going on. But if we draw a box and cut, you can see that I'm actually cutting into the second bevel level. So if we press Q and we go in bevel, we can actually adjust that particular level. And by holding shift, we can actually move a bevel up and down the stack. And that's the important reason that we have the modifier panel showing here. In fact, holding control, you can actually jump to the first bevel, make adjustments, hold control, scroll to jump to the second one, and make adjustments. And as you can see in the hotkeys, you can also press Q and E in order to jump around your bevel modifier. So getting around and actually adjusting these on the fly is something that we attempted to make easier and streamline in this particular version. In addition to that, right here we're looking at this shape and it has a negative shading issue right here. So if we were to go back inside of bevel, we could press N and that'll put a hardened normal, which will fix that box's little red wagon. We'll select this shape here, and if we press Q and we go under bevel, you can see that I'm automatically beveling this 2D shape, which we previously had a bevel called 2D bevel that you would use for this. But now that behavior has been consolidated inside of bevel. So just grabbing a 2D shape, you should be able to do this. And this sets you up for of course, beveling a 2D shape and just going under operations and using a curve extract to quickly turn something like this into a curve. So while bevel has changed a little bit this release, we tried our best to keep it as close to what you know and love as possible. So without further ado, let's move on to the next thing. So I endeavored to create a troubleshooting system inside of HardOps, one that helps users troubleshoot their mesh and understand why certain things fail. People write me all the time and they're like, hey, I've had a failure, things aren't working. And my follow-up question is always, why does it fail? Why did it fail? And they're like, I don't know. Why did it fail? It's like, that is the actual question. Because knowing that it failed is a given. But knowing why it failed is truly what we're looking for, because if we know why it failed, we can actually take efforts towards trying to mitigate and improve it. Right here, we can see that the sharpness just didn't work. And I could go in here and adjust it here, but it's easier to press Control tilde and actually adjust the auto smooth here to get it to the value that I want. So eventually we'll have some parameters here for quickly jumping auto smooth to where we need it. It was something I was contemplating prior to release, and seeing it now, it just brings it up and solidifies that it's something that I'll need to do, because the art of auto smooth is something that is just important. Having your shape shaded correctly at all steps of your adventure is just crucial to me. But that's not the purpose of us breaking out this cube. So we're just going to get in here and create some cuts, and I'm going to control click bevel to add another bevel level, and of course the shading just goes terrible. So this is why I alt click sharpen in order to add a weighted normal. Anytime your shading goes awry, you can just alt click sharpen to add a weighted normal. So we're just cutting on another bevel level here, just working on multiple levels here, just as we always do. And there we go. So far so good. So that's about where we are. So if we press Q and we go under modifier scroll, you can see that I'm able to scroll through all of the modifiers. Or in this case, I'm actually scrolling through the booleans, which is a limit on the list. But we can actually, you see how I'm on boolean 2, and boolean 2 is right before bevel. Well, if I hold shift and I scroll the wheel, I've just moved it to the next level. If I scroll my wheel back, I've moved it back. So there's like a promotion demotion system going on here. And so right now I'm asking the toughest of questions of how hard would it be to get a demotion system inside of HardOps where we can actually demote things automatically. But I'm just letting you know that this is actually the first step of it right here. You can see me actually moving things to the point that I bypassed the mirror. I can go back to the mirror, but being able to see your stack and interact with it while you're adjusting your modifiers just adds a whole level of interactivity to modifier and bool scroll that never existed before. So if we were to go under mod scroll here and we see that shift clicking it brings up modifier scroll, we can go through here and actually scroll our modifiers till we get to the modifier of our curiosity, which in this case is mirror. We can shift click, grab mirror, move it previously up the stack, and continue scrolling forward until we get this result. And that's real interesting. We can also turn on looping in order to roll it back over again. We'll just grab the mirror, which is now excluded from the list. So I believe we can actually press Shift W in order to toggle renderability of a particular mod in case we're wanting to actually lock the sort. But once you start moving modifiers around, it does affect the order that you see in the list, but it doesn't affect the list itself. So you see that I had to scroll far enough to reach the position where mirror was in order to grab it again, because now I actually want to move it back down the stack. And so things are still looking a little bit messy, so let's just find our way to normal, and it's already activated now. We click and apply, and things are right back where we started. But I just want to let you guys know that in addition to modifier and boolean scroll being there as a troubleshooting tool to assist you in finding out what's wrong, you can now also use it to reorder and turn off sort on certain mods on your stack on the fly. And if you get any further questions about it, just use the help. Material scroll also received a bit of a facelift, so if we go in here and just Alt M and control click on material scroll, you can see me just scrolling through materials on this particular model. We'll select this piece and do the same. And you can see that as I scroll, the list on the side over here grows. I forgot to actually move the list up for the purposes of this tutorial, which was something I obsessively had added but forgot to do at this particular moment. But just notice that as I'm scrolling, I'm able to see the list populate, and I'm currently in the most micro version of the UI under tilde, where it just follows the mouse and shows the most minimal of information. If I want more information, I could just press tilde a couple of times and it will set it down back at the bottom, which will make it more formal. So now we can go here and do the same thing. And I just wanted to show you how material scroll is now, and it's now one of my favorite ways to work. I just can't get enough of just going in and just scrolling through materials until I find a color I like, and then realizing that the material result just wasn't the best one until, you know, I go in and look at it from the render result like I am now and scroll through them, which can be a little bit slower, but definitely lets you know what your render result's going to be. So when it comes to KitOps, the general usage is you go in the in panel and you select what you want to import. For example, right here I'm using chips materials. I have my plane selected, and I will control click this in order to assign the material on the fly. And we can click the arrow and we can assign another material on fly. And this is a style of asset insertion. So I'm a guy who actually likes to work in full screen, max screen mode. So the in panel is just not something I'm trying to have sit up on screen all the time. However, I do like to press Q and alt click this in order to bring up the little mini helper, which can help me just quickly insert a material and cycle through them and change my K-Pack and basically do everything that KitOps is able to do in the in panel, but with the portability of a little panel. For this update, if you have KitOps installed and you press Q and you click on the KitOps icon, you will notice that now we have a KitOps loader that is powered by the ST3 system. And the cool thing about this is that you're able to just go in here and just control click something in order to assign it, and you see how the loader just went away. So general usage of the loader, you bring it up, you can use it and it will just go away. However, there's an alternative mode where if we hover over this, you see that if you shift click it, we actually get a persistent version. And through this, we're able to just scroll through our inserts, control click them. We can control click them in the list. We can go through and change our list here. We could even scroll through multiple inserts here to see which insert we actually want, depending on what camo pattern I want to put on the ground here. However, I am a fan of the concrete here. Concrete is something I've used in the last couple of ads to texture ground, so we're just going to go through here and just kind of find the concrete texture that I want. This one has a nice amount of detail in the roughness, so we'll go with that one. Since I'm done with the panel, I'll right click to cancel it, and we'll just select this piece over here. So instead of pressing Q and bringing up the panel this way, what I'll do is actually right click this and choose to assign a shortcut. Currently in Blender at this time in object mode, the letter F does nothing. So I'm just going to borrow F for a moment and just press F to just go here and find the right car paint, or I guess in this case we want to find a nice metal. So we'll scroll up, find metal, and then control click this in order to go through our list. Or if we want a persistent system that we can judge it and maybe check some of the variants, we'll just use this thing, which is capable of showing more entries than using the thumbnail loader. I must also add that in the event that you want to see more than 2 thumbnails, or even limit it down to 1, you're able to do that in our preferences. So just know that those options are also available for you. So maybe something like still distress might work. And there we go. So now I can select the main cube here. Let's try selecting it, and we just want to go ahead and press F and switch this to car paint, and we'll just switch that to Ferrari red, or maybe press Q and shift click this in order to keep this up longer, and we can actually jump through some of these colors. Now I see that this one's going well for me, and of course my camera is set up via quick camera, or basically if you go under the Q menu, you have an option for add camera, which is our hops camera, which will put a driver, allow you to quickly make a turntable. So in closing, I wanted to just show you guys how The new KitOps integration works with the new HardOps SC3 system, and I hope you guys get in there and try it using KitOps and enjoying it and enjoying the SC3 system. Please let us know what you like and what you think about it. And with that, we'll wrap this up.